Welcome back to part 2 of Powerlifting Coaching, the business side. If you haven't watched part 1, in that video, I discussed business service and structure and also pricing. So if you haven't watched that already, I definitely go back and watch that. But at the same time, that video is probably a bit more targeted to people just getting into coaching. If you are a fairly established coach and looking to grow, or obviously someone looking to getting into coaching, this video might pertain a bit more to you. Because in this video, we're going to be talking about marketing, business expansion, accounting, and then following up with the real life example of my business and how I progressed it from the ground up. And in this video, I really consider this the meat and potatoes and what really separates coaches from other coaches. In the last video, like a lot of the stuff was probably very informative to some, but some obvious more to some others. But when it comes to marketing, this is where I see a lot of people not really fully understanding what marketing and advertising is. At a very base level, most people probably, when they hear of advertising and marketing, they're thinking of direct promotion of the business through ads, giveaways, the 3 spots open, promos, and more. But really, that's the least effective form of marketing and advertising. And really, the bread and butter of marketing and advertising is what is unseen and less obvious. So as I kind of discussed in the first video, I've got my MBA with a background in marketing, but honestly, my outside reading from my schooling, I did a lot more in regards to consumer behavior and psychology. That's what really interests me, which really is marketing in a nutshell. Like, why do people purchase or choose the services they do? And what's the reasoning why behind it? What is the motivating factors that kind of entail human or kind of cause human behavior? The most effective form of marketing is typically unseen, yet it's the most powerful in helping to guide human behavior. The marketing most people think of is intrusive and unsolicited, and the marketing that actually works provides the consumer with something of value, whether that's knowledge, whether that's entertainment, whether that's emotion, whether it's something that's actually of tangible value. Rather than the stereotypical advertising and marketing is constantly asking the consumer to give you something. And that's the big thing I'll be talking about in this marketing section and really kind of diving into what that entails, as well as a little bit more obvious forms of marketing. And then from there, helping that transition into business expansion, because the marketing has a lot to do with business expansion of how we're looking at growing from local level to state level to national level to international level. And then we'll quickly touch on accounting. I'll explain there a bit of kind of what I do. I'm not a CPA or a tax accountant. One of the first things I'll say in that section is hire someone that knows what they're doing there. But I'll give you some just brief things that I do, which one of them is to hire a tax accountant, but kind of understanding of how you can be able to structure your business and manage finances. And then, like I said, lastly, kind of wrapping up with how I've kind of been able to progress from where I started about 5 years ago to where I am now. I do want to touch on a couple things though that I realized I forgot from the last video that I think are very important. So I have 2 main things that I realized that I really need to discuss in regards to business structure and service, and being able to set up kind of the foundations of your business. And that is 1, the communication mediums, and then 2, business hours. So first, communication mediums. That's pretty simple. How are you going to message clients? I made the mistake when I first started of they can just text me wherever they want. Some were using Instagram, some were using WhatsApp, some were using Facebook Messenger, some were just text messaging me. And so I've got all these things just flooded with different messages. And at first that wasn't a huge issue. I only got like 8 to 10 people. That's easy to manage. But once you start getting a good group of athletes, that becomes an issue, not only because you're having to like go between all these different mediums of communication, but 2, you start to lose all of your personal, like your privacy and personal side of messaging. Within that, you can kind of choose from there. It's best to get all communication into one format because it's really going to help to kind of self-organize. Because if you're having 30 people message you in a day, it's going to be able to help make sure that you know exactly where to go to find all of them versus things being mixed up with an Instagram DMs or personal text messages and whatnot. So one thing that does need to be factored in is that some communications mediums are not created equal. I prefer Facebook Messenger. The reason why, because I don't typically have anyone personally message me through there. So it's easy to make that my business messaging. But 2, video quality comes through better, as well as it's very easy to scroll back and forth on videos. With text messaging, sometimes video quality doesn't come through as well. And also with Instagram DMs, until lately, they didn't really do this. You couldn't scroll through videos. So you'd have to rewatch the video over and over and over to be able to kind of repeat it or just save it to your phone to be able to watch. So for me, Facebook Messenger was the best medium. And that was is a great tool for me. It helps me keep my text messages to be personal. That's where people who are friends with me and in my personal life or family can message me. Facebook is my business, and Instagram is kind of business, but it's also it's business in the sense of my Instagram page. But that's where I have a different form of communication, talking with followers or just friends on there and whatnot. But being able to separate all of those to kind of make sure that I am more organized in that manner. Second is talking about business hours. And that's another thing that as you grow, you're going to realize that's more important. Is when you first start off, it's not really too much of an issue. If you've got 5 to 10 athletes, the business hours don't really matter too much because you're not too busy. But once you have a full roster, it is very important to be able to make sure you have a separate business life from your personal life, and that there's a good kind of intermeshing between that, because it's very, very easy. And I can tell you something that a lot of powerlifting coaches struggle with is that they just basically work all the time and there's never an off switch. And that's just an entrepreneur in general. But at least for me, I've got a wife and she deserves very specific time where I'm not on my phone or on my computer and I'm fully devoted to her. So setting up business hours is a great way to be able to do that, and creating expectations for your clients to know that this is the times that they can be able to expect you messaging them more frequently and more readily, versus these are the times that you're not going to be messaging them back. And that makes it really easy to kind of, again, we talked about in the first video, setting up expectations and meeting those expectations. So personally for me, my business hours are 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. on weekdays, and then 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. on weekends. I know some people who just take a Sunday off, or maybe they cut their hours at 5 p.m. on weekdays or whatever it may be. It doesn't matter. It's whatever works for you. And I'll even say this. I even know people who go the opposite because they coach a lot of international clients while living in the US. So their business hours are like 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. They actually wake up later and they shift everything to kind of be able to cater towards when their athletes are going. So for me, 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. works because I'm an early riser. I go to bed pretty early. That's perfect for me. It makes sure I can cut off by 7 p.m., spend a couple hours with my wife, and not be interrupted, and be able to kind of shut my brain off, and also be able to sleep better because I'm shutting my brain off. So I think that's very important, and very, very important to stick with that. I will say I was not very good at that. I was not good at setting up in the first place. And even when I did set it up for a long time, I didn't stick to it. And it wasn't until probably the last 6 months that I've really been very strict on that. And it's worked wonders for my sanity of just being able to make sure that like I'm able to turn off and have a personal life and not always working. So I think business hours for coaches beginning out to all the way, especially people listening to this video who have been coaching for a long time and might have a full roster. And if you're not doing this to advanced coaches, it's very important to set this up. All right, so getting into the main topics of this video. First up, it's marketing, developing a marketing strategy. So first up, you got to find a niche and run with it. And the fact if you're going towards powerlifting, that's the niche. And the fact is that within fitness, there's tons of niches. General population, online versus in person. I could go on and on. CrossFit, strongman. There's so many. There's infinite numbers of possibilities of niches within fitness. Powerlifting is a niche within that. So already from the get-go, if you are wanting to be a powerlifting coach, you've already decided a specific niche you are going with. This immediately means a different marketing strategy than if you were targeting general population weight loss clients. If you're targeting powerlifters, they have different things that they are looking for, and they also have different mindsets of what they're trying to do. Powerlifters, compared to a lot of people in fitness, tend to be fairly educated in resistance training. They're usually not very new to it. They're very dedicated and they're very knowledgeable. If they're being a competitive powerlifter like most, they're doing this to compete in the sport, not just to work out. And with all this encompassing, they tend to be more inclined and selective on choosing a coach. They're not just going to go to their random commercial gym, ask the sales manager what personal trainer should they hire, and then just trust this random person. They're typically going to be looking for someone that they trust in some manner, or that is very knowledgeable in some manner. And then we're going to talk about, obviously, that's where marketing comes in. You've got to be able to kind of position yourself as a coach and be able to kind of relay the direct message to your target audience that they need to hear to be able to make their informed decisions. Because to them, a cool ad or a promo, like for a personal trainer that you might see that just posts themselves shirtless and says, hire me, I'll make you look like this, isn't going to work for them. It needs to be a bit more targeted and selective of how you're trying to market towards powerlifters. So within powerlifting, it typically runs through Instagram and YouTube, and starting to be a little bit more through TikTok. Things like Facebook seem to be as popular. Reddit and forums used to be a bit more popular, but have died off a bit. I would say Reddit still is a decently prominent medium, but for the most part, I would say powerlifting runs through Instagram. So knowing that you are trying to market and target powerlifters, that means you need to understand that Instagram is likely going to be your main medium of marketing. And then the last thing to know when saying I'm choosing the niche of powerlifters is that powerlifters tend to be a bit more cost sensitive compared to others in the fitness industry. For some reason, powerlifters tend to be behind on price point in comparison to pretty much every other niche within fitness, which I discussed in the first video. So that's also having an understanding there that just from the get-go, price point's going to be a bit different than if you're targeting in-person training, weight loss, CrossFit, or bodybuilding or things like that. So like I said, if you decided from the get-go that you're targeting powerlifters, you've decided on a niche. But you need to make that decision off of need, not just because you want to. There might be a select few that can overrun a saturated market with just a vastly superior product, but that's going to be few and far between. We need to know that within the niche we're choosing, there's the demand for the service that you're trying to offer. And getting into a bit more of marketing concepts from the 22 immutable laws of marketing, one of the most powerful positions you can have in marketing is being the first to mind. And that doesn't mean the first to market. That doesn't mean the first person, like let's say in your city to coach powerlifting. It needs to be the first to mind. So that either can be because you were the first one and were able to provide a service that was good enough that you were able to establish that you were that person, or you were able to come in to a market where someone was trying that but not doing a very good job, overrun them and be able to take over. I.e., that there was, like an example, is there used to be MP3 players before the iPod. The iPod came in, made a vastly superior product, and if you say MP3 player, which actually some of you may not even know that term since it hasn't been used in a while, you would think Apple iPod, even though it wasn't first to market, but it is first to mind. It owns that position. And that's because marketing is a battle of perception. So the mind takes precedent over the marketplace. So what that means, if there's already a coach in your area doing exactly what you want to do, it's going to be hard to overtake them. So within that, if there's no coaches and there's maybe just a couple few dabbling and they're not really going full time or taking it serious, you obviously very much have the opportunity to be able to take that niche and run with it and be first to mind. Or maybe that coach owns a specific niche, and we're going to talk about that because powerlifting is your niche, but also within powerlifting, there's tons of niches as well. So maybe you're going to find that there's one coach that is dominating a specific niche, and maybe that is 25 to 34-year-old women who are just getting into powerlifting. But there is no one dominating the niche of 18 to 24-year-old men. So I'm going to talk about all the niches it can be, but you need to look at, okay, what am I looking to target here? And is there anyone that already owns that position in the market I'm looking to establish myself? And what we typically see is like, if you're looking at like USAPL numbers, I think they have about 20,000 members. How many of those people are trying to be coaches? I would argue almost thousands of them. And there isn't demand for thousands of powerlifting coaches. So we have a lot of these coaches who are decently unsuccessful. They're just kind of dabbling and coaching 5, 6, 7 people and never really growing it, all kind of battling against each other. We're only seeing a select few able to rise to the point where they're actually making a legitimate living off of this. So we need to look at, as we're entering into a market or a niche that we want to establish a business, is there demand that I'm able to satisfy? And is there enough supply to meet that demand? And I'll discuss this a bit more in the realm of business expansion, but when I moved to Springfield, Missouri, I wasn't planning on being a powerlifting coach. I was dabbling in it, like I've been trying to explain that many people do, but I wasn't planning to go full time. I was moving here after being a fitness manager at a Gold's Gym and deciding I was just gonna go back to personal training. And I did that for about 5 or 6 months, but I quickly realized the demand for personal training did not meet the supply of the number of trainers there were. There was a flood of personal trainers in Springfield and not nearly enough people wanting personal training. There were very few people that were being successful in it. And I looked, I was like, this is something that I'm just going to keep spinning my wheels in. There's not a demand or a niche that I can be able to kind of fulfill here. And so that's when I started pivoting. And I saw that there was a niche and a demand for the need for a full-time powerlifting coach in the area. And specifically, there had never been any tested form of powerlifting really promoted at all in Springfield, especially USAPL. So that's where I saw, again, I'm going to talk about where I was able to kind of position my niche, is I saw the ability to grow tested at powerlifting and the USAPL within Springfield because I saw the demand for it, but no one able to kind of satisfy that need. So if you're in an area where there's one powerlifting gym and there's already a half dozen coaches already in that gym that are already kind of meeting the demand for powerlifting, might not be the right choice for you, barring you're planning to move. I mean, it's the same thing with other businesses. There's a lot of times people have a decision that they want to open a business and they look to see what areas might have a need for that, and then they might have to move there. So honestly, for powerlifting coaching, that's probably not an option for most to just move, since it's not a business that tends to have a high yield of initial income to be able to kind of support that. But Making sure you're looking at that and not just doing this because you want to be a powerlifting coach, but because you also see a need for your services. So as I've mentioned multiple times, powerlifting is a niche, but there are a lot of niches within powerlifting. And one of the laws of marketing is if you try to appeal to everyone, you're going to appeal to no one. Your marketing message needs to be targeted to a specific demographic. It can't be that you want to train every powerlifter ever, because the fact is an 18 to 24-year-old male just getting into powerlifting has a very different outlook on what they're looking for in a coach than a 34 to 45-year-old female who is a master's lifter who's been training for 15 years. You need to know what you're looking for. So within powerlifting, we can run through a lot of different ones, but I'm just going to list off some of the main ones. Is we obviously have age, sex, experience, the city, state, or region they live in, their IQ level. Honestly, depending on someone, they might have a higher importance on kind of an analytical and knowledgeable approach because that's something that they value and they do themselves. Tested versus untested lifting. And then maybe they have a focus of what they're looking for in a coach. Maybe it's programming, maybe it's technique, maybe it's psychological, maybe it's clout. That's a very obvious one that probably a lot of people watching this see, is you want a coach that can get you some clout. And then from that, there's many more, but you need to be able to not only choose the niche of powerlifting, but also choose specific niches within powerlifting that are going to fit what your services that you're going to offer best. And if you're asked as a powerlifting coach, who is your target audience, you should be able to give a very detailed response. Not just things simple like, oh, I want to coach intermediate lifters. It needs to be very detailed with multiple niches within it. So example for mine. From the beginning, and still to this day, my target audience is men from the ages of 22 to 34. They typically have a decent background in resistance training. Not only have they likely been training for years on end, they've also been powerlifting for probably about 2 to 3 years. Because of that, they're likely in more of an intermediate to advanced state of their training career. And within that, they value more an analytical and knowledgeable approach because that's what they are as well. I actually will say that part of my target audience is likely someone who has some form of higher education, whether that is through an undergrad or a post-grad degree. So within that, notice how it was not just one subsect. I have men, I have a certain age group, I have a certain training age, and I have a certain level of IQ/knowledge that I am trying to market towards. And so I'm narrowing my audience, but you need to make sure that audience isn't too narrow. The fact of the matter is that's a decently sized niche. The vast majority of people who powerlift, men or women, are in that 22 to 34-year-old age bracket. I mean, there are plenty of intermediate to advanced lifters, and there are plenty of lifters who have a decently higher IQ. And while I didn't specifically say this in my niche, the fact of the matter is that niche is more prevalent in the tested side of powerlifting. So you'd likely say part of my niche as well is marketing a bit more towards tested powerlifters. And secondly, I don't say this, but likely most of those people that will fit into that niche could be coaches themselves, which is also why a good deal of the people I coach are coaches. And with that, it's worked. Not only because I've obviously have a successful business, but I'm going to put up some screenshots of my Instagram and YouTube analytics. And sure enough, look what my main demographic is. It is very highly biased towards men and very highly biased towards men in that about 22 to 34-year-old age bracket. But what you'll see as well in those analytics is even though I have my very specific audience, there's still others as well. Just because you target a specific audience doesn't mean you're going to not coach other people. You are 100% going to coach people outside of your target demographic to an extent. Even though mine's very specific, do understand that I had about 5 or 6 points there of what I'm targeting, and those are going to overlap into other niches as well. And using myself as the example, I'm not trying to exclude women by any means. I just understand of how I can relate better to men in that age demographic and know how to speak to them with my marketing message. If you follow me, I do coach women, but if you actually look at the women I coach, it tends to overlap with some of those other niches I have, such as a more analytical and knowledgeable approach and the higher education aspect. And looking at my analytics, you'll actually see that for the men, I tend to kind of leak into the younger demographic, but not the older. The opposite's true of women. Even though the main majority is in that 22 to 34-year-old demographic, I leak less into women below that age range and more so into women above that age range, because likely they're going to be looking for a coach who has some of the specific target audience or target niches that I just said as well. And as mentioned, your demographic needs to be large enough to actually create a business from. 22 to 34-year-old men is a big chunk of powerlifting, versus if your demographic is 50 to 70-year-old women, likely not nearly as much. You probably can't make a business out of that. But targeting 22 to 34-year-old men is too big of a demographic. If that was my only niche I was targeting, that is huge. There's way too many subsects of what those lifters are looking for to be able to just target that age demographic alone. So that's why it's very important to have these detailed pinpoints of the specific niches and the niches within those niches of what you're trying to target and appeal to. And so to give kind of a polar opposite scenario, someone I talk to a lot about business is Solana Lewis. If you listen to Two White Lights, we actually just had her on the podcast recently and actually talked about a lot of this. So I definitely recommend listening to that podcast because it was fantastic, as well as she has a podcast, The Power in Lifting, which I'm going to talk about right here. And if you look at Solana's podcast, it puts out a lot of the same information as Two White Lights. We're targeting the similar topics, but if you look at her listener demographics, they're the polar opposite. And that's on purpose. I'm going to put them up here right now so that you can see them. Solana is trying to target a specific niche of powerlifting. And I'm going to read a direct quote from her so that I can have it perfect. So what she said is, I felt the women's side of powerlifting was not getting enough of a spotlight. So I made it my goal to give them a platform by a woman that is for women. I also wanted women who are getting into the sport to be able to hear great tips to help them feel more confident to step on the platform. So within Solana's coaching, she specifically targets women who are beginner to intermediate, which is pretty much the opposite of what I do. I target men in the intermediate to advanced stages. Solana targets beginner to intermediate. And if you were to go to her Instagram page versus mine, it would be very obvious the differences in the information we're putting out. And it's not that either of ours is superior information, it's that it's very specifically targeted to who we are looking to coach. And if we tried to flip-flop and Solana tried to target men who are intermediate to advanced, and I tried to target women who are beginner to intermediate, while we're both fantastic coaches, it wouldn't work. Solana cannot appeal in the same way due to many of her strengths, as well as just kind of the general appeal of how she can relate to that demographic, just like myself in relating to women who are in that age range. And there should not be anything wrong with segmenting like that, because we have to understand that as certain sexes or certain ages or our own personality traits, we're gonna have specific appeal to different people. And if we try to appeal to all of them, it's probably not gonna work. If we're able to appeal to the people we know that we could create strong relationships and marketing messages towards, we're gonna be a lot more successful. And that shows in both, because Solana has a roster that's completely full of exactly what she's marketing towards. And that is women who are beginner to intermediate. And she is just killing it in that market because she's marketing directly towards them. And then even talking about our podcast, it is better in the sense of business that she has a specific podcast that targets women, and Two White Lights has a podcast that probably appeals a bit more towards men. While neither of us try to, again, just going back to coaching, we're not trying to say that I'm not gonna ever coach women, or Solana's never gonna coach men, or that Two White Lights, there's gonna be no female listeners, or for the Power and Lifting, there's gonna be no male listeners. It's just that we have different target audiences that are likely going to listen to us, and we have a marketing message that is a bit more appealing to them. And that's very obvious if you're looking at kind of how we promote those. And in the grand scheme, that is actually going to be more successful as a whole. And a good example of how to explain why is, if you're not familiar with Procter & Gamble, Procter & Gamble obviously has a lot of different products in a lot of different categories: toothpaste, diapers, toilet paper, paper towel rolls, a lot of just general home products. Within that, if you didn't know, Procter & Gamble is one of the geniuses of marketing. In many of those product categories, they have multiple products. I'm gonna use the example of diapers. They actually have two diaper brands. They have Loves and they have Pampers. Pampers is marketed towards first-time children, parents with their first child, because that first child, you want to pamper them. You want to kind of go, it's your first child, you want to do everything for them. So they have Pampers, which are maybe a little bit higher quality, but they're a higher price point. And the marketing message is that they're pampering the kid even more, like that it's a very special high-end diaper. Versus Loves is their kind of more affordable brand that is marketed towards parents having their second child on. Because in a blunt way of saying it, after you have that first child, you're like, okay, I don't need to spend this much money on diapers. I want a cheaper brand. I still love my kid, Loves, but I don't need to spend an extra $2 on every diaper because they're gonna poop and pee in them no matter what, and I've got to throw them away. So I'm gonna switch to Loves for my next couple kids, and I'm gonna stop doing the Pampers. They have two brands that you would, if you go in the store, you say, oh, they're directly competing, but they're not at all. They're trying to wrap up different demographics. So as a whole, Procter & Gamble sells more diapers. If they only sold Pampers, they'd sell less than if they sold Pampers and Luvs, because they're trying to appeal to different audiences. So just like Solana Lewis and I appeal to different coaching demographics, and then our podcasts appeal to different target audiences, we're able to be bigger as a whole by doing that and have broader outreach than if just one of us had a podcast or if just one of us was a coach. You've chosen a target audience. Within the niche of powerlifting, you understand the niches that you feel like you can appeal to and you want to specifically target. So now how do we do that? That's kind of a tough thing to do an all-encompassing topic on because one, there would be an enormous amount of information, but two, I'm not an expert on every single one. I'm an expert on who I target. So for the most part, I'm going to be talking in general about kind of what I am doing to target my specific niche. But within that, there's going to be a broader scope of how you can interplay this within what might be your niche as well. And a massive thing to understand within marketing is perception is reality. All of your marketing and advertising is about creating the perception you want with your audience. And this is why sometimes we get a product or service that doesn't live up to expectation. We buy it because of the perceived value we see in it, and then we get it, and then our expectations and our perceptions were not met. Perception is what's going to get people in the door, but your actual product or service is what's going to keep them. And when it comes to perception, there's 3 foundational keys for a powerlifting coach. One is people just knowing you're a powerlifting coach. That sounds kind of silly, but barring you're some insta-famous lifter like Angelo Fortino, who's not a coach and people just ask him to coach him anyways, probably no one's going to reach out to you to coach them if they don't know you're a coach in the first place. So you have to create the perception that you're a coach, which again, we'll talk about that in a little bit. Number 2, you need to create the perception that you coach a number of people, not just a couple friends here and there. What this does is creates the perception that multiple people trust you. And that if a multitude of people trust you, you must be a decently good coach. And then lastly, that there's a perception that the clients are getting results. I mean, no one's going to want to reach out to you to coach them if they see that none of your clients are getting results. So they want to see the perception that they are. So what this means in practice is I need my target audience to perceive me in specific ways. So not only do I need to be able to meet the requirements of those 3 foundational perceptions, also within my target audience, I was trying to create perceptions within that. One of them being that I'm not very strong. There's nothing cool about my lifting. I can't use that to be able to kind of show that I am a quality coach like some can, barring that whole debate if that even means you're a quality coach. What I needed to do is create the perception that I was smarter and more knowledgeable than really any other coach. And I'm not saying that I was. I'm trying to create the perception that I am. And then we're going to talk about later, if I create the perception, I need to, for the most part, meet that expectation then with the actual service I provide. So to create that perception, I had to create a marketing message that helped to kind of relay that message to my audience. So one of those being my super long Instagram captions. If you've been following me for a while, or even more recently, you know that I write essays within my Instagram captions. And I did this very much on purpose. And at the time I started doing this, 3 so years ago, no one was really doing it. I mean, there might have been some, but I'm going to kind of claim to an extent that I was one of the first ones that kind of had these ultra long Instagram captions and informative Instagram captions on Instagram. Because in reality, Instagram is meant to be short and quick. It's meant to be something you scroll through super quick and you're able to get a short dose of information. You have very short time to be able to capture someone's attention and then they're going to scroll to the next one. And I did something completely against the grain. But that's because I knew my target audience were the ones that would stop and read those captions. They were likely bored on Instagram with the same base level content. They wanted something in more detail. And I've actually had people reach out and say, hey, like if you would just shorten your Instagram captions or make them more readable, you probably would actually have them be more popular. And I say, no, that is very specific and very personal because I want to make sure I am reaching my target audience and I want to filter out the people who are not my target audience for the most part. So I'm not going to have the grandest appeal. I'm probably not going to have 100,000 followers. I'm going to have the followers though that I want because the people I want to target are going to stop and be okay with reading those captions. And the people that aren't my target audience are probably going to scroll through because they're going to be like, I don't want to read that whole thing. That's way too long for me. I want a simple little graphic that tells me what to do and I'm going to scroll on. And then to further dive into what I did on Instagram is, even though I was providing these larger captions, Instagram is visual. We want to appeal visually. So on Instagram, I bias more towards technique-based informative posts. Technique comes across a little bit better through Instagram, and it's a little bit easier to convey. So the majority of my informative content on Instagram was technique based. And then lastly on Instagram, I made sure to cover those 3 big foundational perceptions. Number 1 being that I am a coach. And so if you didn't know, I have a personal page that's private. You can go follow it if you want. But I created a separate page that was just for my coaching business, that I could be able to strictly convey I am a powerlifting coach. So perception number 1 was covered. For perception number 2, even when I was only coaching like 5 to 10 people, something I very strategically do is that I would make sure that I would post each athlete before coming back around and reposting another one on my page. The reason being is, let's say I coach 10 people. That's not a lot. And if I was to constantly just post one person over and over, pretty much they say Steve coaches one person. But if over like a month's time, I make 10 posts highlighting every single one of my athletes, most likely when I come back around to an athlete again, you're not even going to remember too much that I posted about them 6 weeks ago. It's going to look like I have an ever going roster of athletes continually rotating. So you're getting the perception that not only I coach people, but that I coach a number of people. And obviously at a certain point, people know that you coach a number of people, but when you're first starting, they don't. And that was my way to create the perception that I was coaching actually more people than I did. And then number 3, I needed to show that my athletes got results. So whether it was the technique post where I was breaking down kind of what they were doing that was showing the benefits, or something I still do to this day for multiple reasons, is that I would post their meet results or a meet recap of every single lifter every single time, no matter what. I have never not posted a meet recap of any lifter, good or bad. I've had people bomb out, I've had people have bad meets, but the majority, you know what, are pretty good. And I think that the overwhelming majority are good. So therefore, it's creating the perception that I have results. And I'm not creating a fake perception of it either. I'm creating the full encompassing perception that you can see all of my athletes' results. And the vast majority, 95% plus, are getting PRs at their meets. And that's going to create the continued perception that Steve's clients get results. And then leading back to Steve coaches people and Steve coaches a number of people. And then venturing off from Instagram, there's other things I did to continually create the same perception, the same marketing message and appeal to my audience. One of them is when I first started out in particular, I was writing for a bunch of other websites, including Elite FTS, powerliftingtechnique.com. And even though I would say I really didn't get any inquiries from them, and I don't know even how many people read those, the fact that I could market that I was writing for those websites, which had some type of perception that those websites, like you had to be something special or knowledgeable to write for them, furthered the perception that I must be smarter and more knowledgeable than other coaches. So that was very beneficial for me, not in the sense of the actual article itself, but the perception that people were reaching out to me to write for them, which in reality, I was reaching out to them to write for them. I offered for free to do both, and they fortunately accepted it because if you were to reach out to both, it doesn't mean you're just going to get accepted. They liked what I did, and I was able to have that published. But that just helped further the perception, though, that I was a very knowledgeable coach because these websites are wanting to publish my information. And then the last medium I've kind of progressed to is YouTube. You're watching that right now. And notice I carried over my long form content, just like I did on Instagram, where people were like, you should do something shorter. No one's going to want to read this entire essay that goes into the comments. The likely thing is most people would say, oh, your YouTube videos need to be between 10 to 20 minutes. That's what works. That's what works in the algorithm. And guess what? I make hour-long videos. I don't care. I am not trying to appeal to the masses. My views are not trying to be 100,000. I am trying to target a very specific 2,000 to 6,000 person niche that is likely going to love the content I do and be obsessed with it because this is what they are looking for. Within that too, there were dozens of YouTube channels. There's some great ones that provide more shorter form content. When I got into it, absolutely no one that I know of was producing hour-long informative content for free on YouTube. So it was a niche within YouTube. No one was doing it, and I can own that. Like I would bet within powerlifting, people think, oh, hour-long free YouTube videos, that's Steve DeNovi. So it was a niche within YouTube, and also going back within Instagram that I was able to gather because no one was meeting that demand, even though that there was an audience that would want that. And then within YouTube as well, one of the reasons I wanted to dive into that is it allowed me to get a bit more into programming and topics that wouldn't convey very well through Instagram. So that's why I did that in particular, because Instagram was a bit limiting on how much I could dive into programming, dive into topics like this, where longer form visual content, where I can be able to show things. If you watch my programming videos of screenshots, to be able to kind of me typing it, or the screen recording of me actually like writing things out, as well as even obviously more advanced technique stuff. There's eventual point where Instagram has its limitations, and YouTube was able to fulfill that so that I could further my long form content to further the perception that as a coach, I'm just smarter and more knowledgeable than most. So wrapping this back into my actual coaching, one of the reasons I chose to continue to be consistent with my marketing message, I needed to choose a form of coaching that helped to satisfy that perception, which for me was a high communication style and very personalized style of coaching. If I was to say I'm the smartest, I produce these long form content, I'm extremely detailed, I'm extremely analytical, and then I went and coached 80 people and I just templated programs and you only heard from me once a week, that would go against the perception I'm trying to create on social media, and expectations would not be met. Barring you knew I provided a high communication and kind of high individualistic style of coaching, your perception on social media would think that I would do that just because of the marketing message I'm putting out and how much detail. And if you didn't get that detail within my coaching, that's where the service doesn't meet the perception, and I'm just going to start churning through clients, and I'm not going to actually produce the product that I'm trying to basically perceive that I give. I was very purposeful as well on how I acted on social media and how I act on my YouTube videos and act on my Instagram. Because if you know me outside of this professional setting, I have the humor of a 12-year-old and act like one sometimes. But that doesn't align with my marketing message. My marketing and what I'm trying to do is a very professional message that is showing that I'm smarter and more knowledgeable. So if I tried to say I'm smarter and more knowledgeable, but I make really inappropriate posts, I produce a lot of drama, and all these things that kind of go against what people would perceive as what a person who's smarter and knowledgeable would be kind of a hypocritical message. So I act, not that I'm unprofessional, but in any means outside of my professional setting, but I'm very purposeful in the professional setting to be very professional. And so understand though, when I started doing this, there really wasn't any competition within the very specific niche I chose, of not only the target niche of the audience, but how I reached that audience. No one was really making super long Instagram captions. No one was making hour-long YouTube videos. That's one of the reasons why I was able to garner a following that really enjoyed that content. If you were to just go copy what I did and try it, do it now, you're going to have a lot of competition because there's a lot of people trying to do it and it's kind of flooded. It's actually a conversation I had with one of the people I coach, who's a powerlifting coach himself. He's like, I feel like I need to make the same stuff that you do, but like everyone's doing it now. Like I feel like it like, what's the point? And that was a very good thing he noticed because everyone's trying to do the same thing. So I gave him some pointers of how he can be able to kind of deviate from that niche and be able to kind of form his own niche. But this is also where the next topic of business expansion is going to come in very useful, because you have to understand at this point, my target audience is national to international. I actually don't do much specifically anymore to target the local level in the sense of where I'm currently at, or even really statewide. There would be a niche now for someone to come in locally in Springfield, Missouri, and start being able to take over a very similar niche to me, but doing it at a local level. So also understand that there is niches that can be like myself, but you can be able to take that down to, okay, I might be appealing national to international, which is a current niche now, even though it didn't used to be. It used to be local, and someone now can come and try and replicate something similar, but to a local audience. But that's going to take a different type of marketing, which I'm going to get to again in a bit here in the marketing section, and also the business expansion section. Now, within all of this, as I've said multiple times, perception gets people in the door, but your actual service and living up to that expectation is what's going to keep people. The way I marketed led to a lot of inquiries. I've been full for a very long time and never had it's been well over 2 years before I've had any issue filling up a spot that might open up. And the reason why is because my actual service meets the perception. Your marketing cannot be a lie. If it's a lie, people are going to start sniffing that out. So for me, I actually have to deliver on that message I'm trying to portray, that I am smarter, more detailed, and more knowledgeable than the average coach. And since I lived up to that perception, it creates a domino effect, and it only gets stronger and stronger. If I create the perception of smarter and more knowledgeable, people come to me for that. I live up to that expectation, if not exceed it. They stay with me for a while. Everyone around is going to see that Steve is living up to that expectation and that perception. They're going to hear from word of mouth from those people that Steve lives up to that expectation and perception. And then it's just going to be a domino effect where now my marketing message is looked as very truthful, very honest, and it's just going to continue a domino effect where more and more people are buying into the perception and buying into my marketing message. So that's one thing as a newer coach you need to know, is that like, it's not just going to happen overnight. And what you're literally looking for is once perception and reality are confirmed in the consumer's mind, that's where the dominoes start to kind of trickle and start to kind of continue to pick up momentum. The more and more that reality is confirmed and the expectations are met, the stronger and stronger that perception gets within your target audience. So with that was the base of my marketing strategy. I could probably stop here, and hopefully you all would learn a lot about at least how I was able to structure things and thought through the process. But I want to give a lot more stuff about how you can use this for yourself. So let's get a little bit more detailed of like what we can be able to do specifically within marketing to be able to help you be able to structure this within what your marketing message and target audience would be looking for. So for you personally, one of the main things you need to do is leverage your strengths. I'm a big believer in taking what you're best at and making it even better. Doesn't mean not to work on your weaknesses, but leverage what you're really good at. Much like marketing, if you just try and be great at everything, you end up being great at nothing. So we need to take what we feel like we are very strong at and be able to leverage that within choosing our niche and then appealing to our niche. So for me, just using an example, I'm fairly intelligent, organized, and analytical. I have a strong ability to convey complex topics in an understandable manner. I have good communication skills and I'm articulate. I tend to be able to write in the manner I speak, which gives me a unique voice and message when I write things. And then within coaching, I believe I have a comparative advantage in my understanding of complex programming and technique more so than I believe other coaches do. On the opposite end though, I have plenty of weaknesses. I'm a fairly introverted person, even though likely through social media, it might seem that I'm pretty outgoing. I'm really good at public speaking, even if this wasn't into a camera. But if it's just in general social settings, I'm very introverted and fairly shy. Personality-wise, I struggle with empathy and sympathy. That's one of the reasons why I wasn't the best personal trainer in person. And within the realm of psychology and sports performance, I'm not the best motivator or someone that's really good or helping people overcome performance anxiety or other things of that nature. I'm a pretty blunt person. If you're coached by me, you know I don't take excuses well, and I'm really big on people focusing on what they can control versus what they cannot control. And then within powerlifting, my lifts aren't very impressive. I have nothing to brag about there, so therefore I can't use my own lifting or my own physique in any way to be able to kind of market my supposed coaching credentials. And because of this understanding of my strengths and weaknesses, I'm able to shape what I do to utilize what I'm best at. Hearing both those strengths and weaknesses, I think likely you can be able to understand why I chose the target audience I did and the marketing message I did, because it was leveraging my strengths. If I tried to do things that were outside my comfort zone, such as trying to make a lot more posts about like psychological and motivational factors, or making a lot more posts about my own lifting and like trying to like flaunt it to an extent, it might come across a little bit as fake. What we do with that marketing message needs to come across as honest and truthful versus trying to do things that we're not good at. Most likely people are eventually going to sniff that out, see that as fake, see that as not gain any kind of positive perception from that, but likely even a negative perception. So again, leverage your strengths and the mediums of what you do. For me, long form content and something like YouTube biases a lot better into my strengths versus some other aspects of what I could be doing marketing wise. Next up is branding, and you need to decide within your coaching business how you want to brand yourself. And what this means is maybe coaches who start off more well-known kind of use their own name as their brand from the get-go, whereas others like me create a brand that they operate behind. And this isn't mutually exclusive. You very well may pivot depending on the eventual progression, but like an example that's opposite of me is someone like Sean Noriega. He was a very accomplished lifter. He got into coaching for the most part for a while, just used his own name as his brand. But recently, as he wants to extend his brand and have more options, he's transferred over to an actual brand identity of Nori Powerlifting, where now he has coaches under him, he has products, and eventually that's going to expand. I would argue that without even talking to Sean, I think he likely did that knowing that if he's going to expand into multiple avenues and product realms, he's going to need a brand to operate under versus just his name. And for me, especially when I first started, as I mentioned if you watched the first video, I had planned originally for PRs to be a team of multiple coaches. So it was very important to operate under a brand name versus Steve DeNovi being the name that's overriding, because then it would really kind of stunt the kind of worth of the other coaches if Steve DeNovi was the brand. As well as, when I first started, Steve DeNovi meant absolutely nothing. And really, up until recently, PRs was much more recognizable than the name Steve DeNovi, and that's exactly how I wanted it to be. And with choosing PRs, it was very intentional, and I had multiple variations of what it meant as well. So if you don't know, PRs stands for Progressive Resistance Systems. The marketing message there is pretty simple. Powerlifting as a whole, progressive overload is a key foundation of what you need to progress. So I'm basically stating a simple concept that everything I do is built around is progressive resistance, which is going to help people get stronger. Obviously, PRs is also an acronym I chose for a very specific reason, because PRs has meaning within powerlifting of hitting like a personal record. There actually was another coaching business that did go under a PRs acronym. And honestly, I didn't know that. I tried to search for that when I first started, and I did not find that, which is why I went with it and was fairly surprised that it didn't, anyone wasn't using it, but I found out eventually it was. But that niche, that group of coaches was definitely targeting a different niche. And so I actually over time have been able to kind of steal the PRs acronym, which obviously is a great acronym. It's a very recognizable word. And then it gives me a lot of room for kind of brand extension in the sense of the name. So a lot of people refer to me as PRs Performance, and that was very specific with my Instagram of having something that not just going by Progressive Resistance Systems, because that's hard to remember, not just going by PRs because that is too simple, because it has too much application to other things, but having PRs Performance was able to kind of separate that, where PRs still, in a sense, somewhat belongs to me, but not totally. Attaching performance now makes it a brand entity that is very recognizable. And that name in particular has indirect messaging of hitting PRs and having high performance within powerlifting. And then secondly, I also have the brand extension of PRs on the Platform, which is my website, prsontheplatform.com. I did that for a couple reasons. One, obviously the play on words is something that we use within powerlifting, trying to hit PRs on the platform. And that's entailing that as a coach, I'm going to help you do that. Second, it was chosen within my website for the reason that for search engine optimization, that might be a keyword someone is looking for within different search topics. So it was a way to be able to help with search engine optimization there, of using that kind of brand extension name for my website. And so having this recognizable brand opens up the ability to have a lot of different business opportunities, which is again why I said most likely that's the reason Sean has eventually branded his coaching, so that he can be able to expand it under an umbrella of Nori Powerlifting. Your name can only be so much. Steve DeNovi can only mean so much. Sean Noriegas can only mean so much. But PRs, Performance, and Nori Powerlifting can mean a lot. Just like I said, Procter & Gamble has multiple different products under them. Nori Powerlifting or PRs can have multiple products under them, where if it was just under our name alone, it likely wouldn't resonate as well. So next up, we'll look at our marketing tools, which is the bulk of this section here, of looking at kind of how to be able to set up your own ability to market and advertise. And the first one is Instagram. That should be no surprise. As I mentioned, powerlifting kind of runs through Instagram. So Instagram is a very important tool to be able to market through. And one thing within Instagram that's very important to understand is the value of a client, because we can actually put a monetary value on a client who is posting consistently on Instagram. First off, I'd recommend never using Facebook ads or Instagram ads for powerlifting. I don't really think they do much. Those tend to appeal a bit more to general population. And again, like I said, powerlifters are very selective. They tend to not really go for like advertisements per se. They're going to be a bit more wanting some type of value from you in the sense of the content you provide. But within that, there is a monetary value for how much Facebook and Instagram ads cost. Now, I did it. I did an Instagram ad at one point. So it's been 4 years since I did it. So maybe the cost has changed. I would assume it's actually more expensive now than when I did it. Who knows? But I could be wrong on the actual cost here. But the general estimate of when the one time I did an Instagram ad, it was about $20 for a 2,000 person outreach. If we equate that to a client, let's say your average client has 500 to 700 followers. I think that's a pretty good number. That's probably a pretty average client that I'm looking at. And that likely means one of their posts is reaching anywhere between 300 to 600 people. So doing the math, if this client posted 3 times a week for a month, 4 weeks, that would be an outreach of about 6,000, which based on the numbers I gave, that's worth $60 to you in Instagram advertisement. Add in the fact that they're probably talking to their friends at the gym and some other things I'm going to mention here in a bit, it's very possible to be able to kind of put the value of a client, of a general, just average client following, at about $100 a month in advertising budget that's completely free to you if you use it right. As a powerlifting coach, there really shouldn't be much cost of marketing. It's all free marketing outside of the time that we invest into creating content, or outside of the passive marketing our clients are giving us. So when you're first starting out as a coach, and let's say you're charging $50, you're in sense actually getting more like $150 from your client. If this is a more, let's say, normalized business where there's going to be an actual monetary value to a marketing budget, when you first start out, that marketing budget tends to be decently high. And that's where a lot of times that a lot of businesses aren't profitable from the get-go. So when you're looking at charging someone $50 at the very start of your coaching, but you're getting $100 in value of marketing from them, you can look at that. Like if you actually say, I'm paying $100 in marketing, and they're actually paying me $150. Hopefully that makes sense. It's basically like they're paying you $150 because of their value, but $100 of what they're paying you is going straight back into marketing, and you're only making a $50 net profit off of it. That's kind of what you're seeing from the get-go. But as you progress, that monetary value of the client's kind of outreach kind of starts to diminish. And that's where we can kind of see the price start to rise, because your value as a coach has kind of superseded the value of that free marketing the client's giving you. Because like for me at this point, I get significantly higher outreach than probably 95% of my clients. There's only a select few people I coach that are going to get a higher outreach of me, that are actually going to, I'm not going to say benefit me by any means. All my clients benefit me. I'm not trying to demean this by any means, but in the sense of providing further outreach that is actually like valuable in the sense of marketing budget, there's only a few people I coach who do that. So from each client, I really don't need that $100 of marketing value. I now just need the revenue, because I'm not going to put the money back into marketing in the sense of like a normalized business. So if someone's now paying me $200, I don't need to take any of that and put it back into marketing. I want straight $200 revenue, which is why, one of the reasons why, as you progress as a coach, that you charge more, because you no longer need the marketing value as much. You now more just need the direct revenue, because you don't need to spend as much inadvertently or indirectly on the marketing side of things. So moving into actual Instagram activity, one of the biggest things that I'll say in regards to making content on Instagram is obviously, one, fulfill those perceptions I talked about. But if you're making informative posts, your goal should not be likes. It should be saves and shares. That is what you're making a post about. Not only is that what is actually the most beneficial now on the Instagram algorithm. A couple of years back, that wasn't the case. That's what's going to get you the highest outreach and get your stuff shared on the Explore page and other things like that, and in hashtags. But if someone's saving and sharing your content, that means they are consuming it in a much more direct manner. That means they're not just skimming through it, pushing a like button real quick and skimming on to the next one. That means they've either read it and they want to come back to it again, or it's important enough that they want to save it, that they want to come see it again and read through it, or they think it's so good they want to share it with their friends. So your goal when you are writing posts is not how many likes I can get, it's how many saves and shares should I get. And this goes for stories too. Obviously, there'll be sometimes I'm going to post informative content on my stories, but there's sometimes I post some other stuff just because I know it's going to get traction and get shares. So like there, for instance, I got a big uptick in followers at one point because I made a joking meme about how to decide on coach based off of being USPA lifter versus a USAPL lifter. And it was memed. It got shared by Ed Cohen. It got shared by Ellis McLean. I think Sean Noriega showed it before. This is way before I even coached Sean. And it got a bunch of traction. And it was very purposeful. I didn't just make that meme just to do something stupid. I made that meme because it was relevant at the time and I knew it was going to get a bunch of shares. And so there's sometimes you'll see on my story that I'm doing things a little outside my general marketing message. But it's because I know that I have an ability likely with that to get increased shares to then get people to cycle to my profile to see the rest of the content I have. But outside of you just posting and stuff like that, there's very successful ways that you can use Instagram to reach your target audience that isn't directly through what you post on your stories or on your Instagram page. It's not as bad as it used to be, but likely, I mean, a huge issue in the past was all the people that would follow, unfollow, or just like every single day you post, you get the same like from the same person because they've got a bot that just runs through certain hashtags. That doesn't exist anymore. And also no one really fell for that because it was very insincere. Something that works well though, and is sincere, is being targeted with who you follow and whose posts you like and who you interact with. And I'll touch a bit more on this on the business expansion side of things, but one of the things I did when especially looking when I was at the local level is visiting gym location pages. Not the actual gym location or gym page, their location page, if you're familiar with that. And what I would do is I would go look through their location page at recent posts, if not even a little bit back of 2-3 months, and see who's lifting with a barbell. This could be me looking at very specific powerlifting gyms in Springfield. Even at the time when I started, there wasn't very many specific powerlifting gyms, so I was looking at Anytime Fitness. I was even looking at Planet Fitness. I was looking at any gym's location page to see people who were squatting, benching, and deadlifting. And from that, I knew they were prospective people who might be interested in powerlifting or interested in my coaching. Not necessarily like from the get-go, but I wanted to create some type of relationship with them. So depending on how much value I saw of them being a potential prospect, I would start interacting with their page of liking. I would follow them. I'd start communicating with them because they were people I could directly target, and they would see I'm from Springfield as well, and be able to kind of have a little bit more of a trust relationship there. You can also look at the gym's personal page too. And what you would likely do there is go to their post and see who's liking it. You could go to their followers and scroll through, but that's a bit tough because a lot of people will follow gym pages but not actually lift at that gym. So I would typically go to their post and see who's consistently liking them. Click on their profile, see if there's someone who lifts at that gym, because a lot of times people aren't tagging location pages. And again, same thing. I start interacting with them, but truthfully interacting with them, not just like doing it because like I'm going to do it one time and I'm going to ignore them. I would be very specific that I'd interact with them for months on end, if not sometimes over a year. And many times that would eventually lead to them reaching out to me coaching. I'll explain kind of the reasons why that would happen. And the other thing I would do this with is for meets I attended. I'd go to the location page for wherever the meet was held. I was at that meet, so people were be able to see me there. So likely they have possibly a face or some type of knowledge of me, and I start interacting with them as well. And what this does, especially in the gym side of things, is it one, opens the possibility up to you coaching these people, but two, let's say there's a powerlifting gym that you want to start growing within. You coach one person. When you start interacting with the other people from the gym and they come to your page, they're gonna be like, oh, that's the person that's coached by so-and-so. And then they're going to see you as a more friendly person to interact with and more trustworthy, because they see that as a bit more intentional and honest because they know someone who's coached by you. And then as they start, maybe they follow you back, or maybe they just now know about you. Either way, you have some type of a spot in their mind that they know you are a powerlifting coach. They know that possibly someone in your gym, their gym also is coached by you. So if the thought comes up that that they want a powerlifting coach, you might be readily on their mind. They're going to go to so-and-so lifter that you coach and start maybe asking questions about Steve, see who he is. And then maybe they're going to follow you back and start following your content. But either way, it's a very honest way to be able to start interacting with people who you're trying to very specifically target. And this eventually will expand. For instance, when I first got to Springfield, I was targeting some very specific gyms, as well as actually a couple in St. Louis, because I had moved from St. Louis and had a decent outreach there. And so there was about 4 or 5 gyms that I was very specifically targeting, that I would visit their location pages on a weekly basis, visit their gym pages occasionally to be able to look at kind of who's liking their posts and start interacting with those people and start to get a bit of a kind of grasp and kind of reach within those gyms. One was St. Louis Barbell in St. Louis, Missouri. I started out, I think, just coaching one person, and eventually that grew to me coaching like 7 to 8 people there. I had a good stronghold there. At that point, not saying I don't want to continue to possibly interact with members there, but once you get to a certain point of coaching so many people, they're going to do the work for you within that gym. So the same thing happened in Springfield. I had a gym I was really trying to be able to kind of create that outreach in. Once that kind of reached a stronghold where I had a really good grasp there, I kind of maximized to an extent my outreach in Springfield. It was just going to grow naturally now, and the same with St. Louis. And so I saw I needed to expand. Once I have my local business under wraps to an extent, I wanted to expand. And I saw the ability to expand to Strong Barbell in Kansas City as a big opportunity, because that was the biggest powerlifting gym and had the most powerlifting gyms in our entire region. So I really worked hard on doing that. And it took about 6 months. And after about 6 months, I had a person finally reach out, and I coached them. And then within the next 6 months, I coached, I think, 9 people at that gym. So it takes time. It took me a lot of time of just trying to create relationships and create trust and create outreach within those gyms of interacting with them. But once I did, it was fortunately kind of a domino effect from there. Because one, they had some type of knowledge of who I was. But two, they then had the perception of who I was, and they started to see other people trusting that. and then telling them that the perception was a reality through good word of mouth. And then when they needed a coach, they reached out to me. And so that continued to expand and expand and expand. And I'll talk about that a bit more later, but that was something I did for a very long time, as I was able to target gyms and grow my outreach from local to national and so on and so forth. But notice I'm not just spamming everyone. I'm very selective on who I'm targeting. I mean, like this, at a certain gym, it might only have been 4 or 5 people I'm trying to specifically interact with because I see they possibly fit into my niche. I saw maybe that they are in the age demographic. They're tested lifters. They're coaches themselves. I would very specifically look for people who probably would be appealing to my my marketing message would appeal to start trying to target and form relationships with. If I tried to just spam everyone, 1, it would probably look fake, but 2, I just wouldn't have enough time to keep up with those interactions. And again, it would continue the perception of how it would be looking fake. I was just very specific on who I targeted and looked at the people that I wanted to interact with, fitting into my niche, knowing that once they would visit my Instagram page, they likely would see some value in it because it's what they would be looking for. And then that would just create a domino effect of the things I've already mentioned. And when I first started, I didn't care about anything outside of Springfield and St. Louis. That's where a lot of people go wrong. And again, I'm going to talk about that on the business expansion side, is I was extremely focused on dominating locally. And that could have been my niche forever. I could have just worried about Springfield and St. Louis and Kansas City for the most part, because at a certain point, I was only coaching people mainly in Missouri and my roster was completely full. I could have just kept doing that and had a very successful business and very, very happy. But one thing led to another, and then eventually I am where I am now, and it's expanded past that. But the big key here is that I was very focused and targeted at first with people I felt I had an easier ability to reach than just trying to like coach everyone all of a sudden or out of nowhere and thinking everyone's just all of a sudden think Steve DeNovi's the person I want as my coach. And then the last kind of Instagram specific tactic I'll cover is reposting people who you want to network with and who are giving out similar content or marketing messages. Reason being is 1, it creates a community of people who have similar interests and similar philosophies. But 2, it's kind of free marketing for you. When you take someone's post who's putting out information that's very similar to yours, who you agree with, and you pre-post it on your story for your followers, you're basically stating 1, I agree with this. And then 2, if your followers didn't know this person already, you're giving them more information to go follow. So it's just a free way to provide content to your clients that helps to benefit your marketing message and helps just to grow your own brand. Now with that, if you just start spamming stuff that makes no sense, you're spamming supplements because you're sponsored by X random brand that reached out to you. You're just reposting random people that don't fit in your marketing message. It's going to demean what you post on your story. That's something I've had people reach out, like me wanting to kind of help them. And I kind of told them, I'm like, I'm not going to share your stuff because if I do, 2 things. 1, no one's going to click on it because your information doesn't appeal to anyone I appeal to. Or 2, it's going to demean me sharing anything because I need to create a system that people trust that when I share something, they should probably go take a look at it. Versus if I'm just spamming random things and too many times people click on it and they're like, this is stupid, this makes no sense, why would Steve share this? Eventually they're not gonna really care to click on the stuff in the stories because they don't think it means anything because Steve just spams stuff. So you gotta be very targeted with that. Next up on marketing tools is t-shirts. And this one is huge if you do it right. Because understand, your athletes are your best marketing tools, whether you're doing that in social media or they're in the gym. Their direct or indirect promotion of you is the single most beneficial thing you can have for your business. And when it comes to Instagram, they might be tagging you or you can repost it. People will know you coach them. But within the gym, you don't know who coaches who unless 1, you talk directly to them, or 2, you see a big old logo on someone's shirt. So something I think is extremely important when getting into coaching is 1, get a professionally made logo. Don't get some cheap one that's some stock photo. Those look super fake and no one wants to put those on a t-shirt. Pay someone. It's about $150 to $200. I'll actually include a link in my bio or link down in the description of Alicia, who does my logos because she's fantastic. She does all the meet logos I do. She's done the PRs ones, does a fantastic job. I'd reach out to her. But once you get a professional logo, stamp it on a t-shirt and give a free shirt to every athlete you coach because it works. They're going to wear it. They're going to wear it proudly. And every single time they do, it's free advertising for you. And not only are they wearing it in the gym, but on Instagram too, obviously 1, they might be tagging you, but 2, if they got a big old PRs logo on the front of their shirt when they're hitting a squat PR, people can see that as well. And it's kind of indirect. It's not like people are looking for that logo on the shirt, but it's indirect. And the more and more they just get this continual kind of imaging of your logo from different mediums and different things, the more they're going to have brand recognition with what is PRs and have more likelihood to want to be able to follow or reach out or interact with myself or you as a coach. And to this day, every athlete I coach gets their first shirt free. I want every single person to have a shirt. Obviously, when I first started coaching, it probably benefited me a bit more to have everyone wearing my shirts. But even now, I want to make sure, just as a thank you to all my athletes, I want them all to have a free shirt. That's a simple, cheap marketing budget option for me. And then from there, I have shirt releases. Probably every 6 months, I do a new shirt with a new design. And I don't charge anything above what it costs me because I don't care about making money on those. It's my free marketing budget. It's able to get that out. The lifters are going to wear it. They're going to want to represent my brand. People are going to see that in the gym. People are going to see that on the platform. People are going to see that when they're posting on Instagram. It's just going to be able to get my logo and my name out there as much as possible. Because if I'm just selling them at cost, it's not costing me anything, and the athletes are getting them super cheap, so they're likely going to want to buy more because I'm not really marking them up too much. So it's just a win-win all around. There's a trick to this, though, because the immediate thing every coach goes and does when they make a t-shirt is they make a comp t-shirt, and they put this little tiny logo up here. You can see mine right here. This is not a comp shirt, but guess what? This is going to be much more displayable everywhere but in competition. And guess how many times people compete? Maybe once or twice a year. So you would be making a shirt that is only beneficial in the sense of your marketing once or twice a year. When they're wearing it in the gym, it's super small. People can barely see it. They can't see it, for sure can't really see it on Instagram. So I actually, fortunately, made a mistake on my first time making shirts. I was gonna make a comp t-shirt just like everyone else. And I made a mistake. The shirt person made a mistake and they made it super huge, made it across the chest. And it was too close to a meet. And I was like, I can't redo these real quick. I'm just gonna let my athletes have them. And then afterwards I realized, okay, that was genius, because now every single time that they're posting on Instagram, there is a massive PRs logo across their chest. And there is no ifs, ands, or buts who was being coached by them and what team they're on. And so from there, it took me almost 2.5 years before I made a comp t-shirt. I didn't do it for a very long time because the fact matters too, most singlets now cover up that little logo. There's very few singlets that actually show that logo. So it's kind of a useless shirt. I eventually did it because there was enough demand from my athletes. I was like, okay, I'll do a comp t-shirt for you. You all have plenty of shirts that have a big PRs. We'll do a comp t-shirt now. But I would highly, highly recommend the vast majority of your shirts, and especially when you first start, is a big old logo across the chest. You want that to be very legible for people to be able to read in the gym. Obviously not on the platform, but guess what? They're going to be either one, pulling their singlet down in between when they're resting so people can see the big PRs, or after the meet taking pictures so they have a big old PRs logo across their chest. And I'm going to get this in a little bit, but I have a lot of athletes who get them for their families too. And then they're all wearing big old PRs logos across their chest at the meet. That little tiny logo up here for the comp tees is kind of useless. I would not do that until you have enough athletes that is warranting that. Next up on marketing tools is directing meets. And this is a little harder one. This is one that I would not recommend for everyone. I honestly got into directing meets thinking it was going to be part of my business and something I was actually going to make money off of. And I quickly realized that wasn't the case. Now, some people can. Wasn't going to happen for me. I probably lost money off of the 7 or so meets I've run. But I lost money in the short term, but I've gained a lot of money in the long term. And I'm going to get into why, and why it was super, super beneficial for me to do this when I first started out as a coach. But now where I'm at now, it's not nearly as beneficial and likely wouldn't give me the same benefit outside of just providing meets for lifters. But with meet directing, there probably in the first 2 years of me coaching wasn't a medium I got more athletes from than from directing meets. When you direct a meet, every lifter knows who you are. They're constantly communicating with you, and you become a leader in the community due to running meets, especially in Missouri in particular, because there's not very many meets. If you're going down to Texas, maybe that's a little bit harder. Again, this is looking at the niche. If you're in Texas where there's meets every weekend and there's multiple meets, running meets might not be super beneficial for you. But if you're in a state like Missouri where there's not very many meets, and like you will instantly become like the USAPL guy or the USPA guy in your region or state by running meets, it can be incredibly beneficial for you to start directing meets and kind of using that to help filter your coaching business. Because how you run a meet is a sales pitch to every single athlete that is competing. When I ran meets, I over communicated, probably more than any director I've ever met other than maybe Sabre in Virginia. My attention to detail on everything was OCD. I had to make sure everything was perfect for every little thing. I honestly, none of my meets have had really any issues because I was so on point with how everything was ran in the planning through the actual execution of it. I made myself very easily reachable by athletes so they communicate with me and ask questions anytime they want. And I'd email them within 24 hours, if not even faster than that. And I'd be confident to say anyone who has done one of my meets has walked away with a great experience. So how does this lead to coaching? If you've ever heard of the halo effect means if you have one desirable trait, it makes people perceive that you have multiple desirable traits. It's the common one is someone's attractive, so they must be smart. They must be good at what they do. It creates this perception that they must have multiple good traits because of one good trait. So when I ran meets and I was very good with communication, I was very responsive to athletes, I ran really good meets, and I gave everyone a good experience. The halo effect is then that if Steve does this with his meets, I bet he does it with his coaching as well. Which, guess what? Perception. I'm trying to create perception through that. And then if they choose me as a coach, I need to meet those expectations. And then also when they did my meets, it was an easy in. As I already mentioned, I would go to other meets location pages, but if it's my own meet, I have the roster of exactly who competed. I can go find them on Instagram. I can go follow them. I can interact with them afterwards. They're going to likely follow me back since I was the meet director and they want further information of future meets. So it was a very, very easy in to be able to create a relationship with these athletes. And almost every meet I ran, like clockwork, within 6 months after the meet, I'd be coaching at least 3 to 4 of those lifters every single time, no ifs, ands, or buts. As mentioned, I made hardly any money off of directing the meets themselves, but if you factor in that every meet got me 3 to 4 lifters, and the average time span of me coaching a lifter is somewhere probably around like 1.5 to 2 years, the actual revenue I got from that due to my coaching was enormous. Like I said, though, that was a bit more beneficial to me when I first started. And if I would have stayed more of keeping my niche to be local and state and regional, likely meet directing would still be really beneficial for me and would be a core part of my marketing and my business, because it would be trying to make sure that I am still the go-to guy in my state when it comes to not only meet directing, but also then entailing that it's going to leak into my coaching. Now being a bit more nationally and internationally involved, it wouldn't benefit me as much. One, because I don't really have spots open to coach people. But two, because I have other things I'm doing, like with Two White Lights. I have the benefit of being able to do commentating, where I am the color commentator and being able to give information out and being able to display my knowledge through color commentating, or just through Two White Lights, or through other aspects that I have a broader outreach that I'm able to now leverage. But if I was still focusing on the local niche, meet directing is something that was unbelievably beneficial. But like I said, though, make sure you leverage your strengths. Meet directing for me I've actually, even before hosting USAPL meets, I've been hosting strength competitions dating back to 2011, so almost 11 years now, and I'm good at it because I'm very, very organized and I'm very, very detail oriented. So it fit my strength. Not everyone is meant to direct meets. It is not an easy thing. There's a lot. I tell my wife all the time, it's like doing a wedding every year, and she didn't believe me until recently when she was a little bit more involved and saw that there's just a lot involved with meet directing. It's not an easy thing to do. So not everyone is meant to do it, but if it is, and you want to gain some traction locally and statewide, it is one of the best marketing tools you have to be able to reach athletes and then create ability to create relationships with them and allow that to be able to kind of transfer into eventual coaching. And so whether you direct meets or not, what you can do is attend meets. So you don't have to be a meet director to attend as many meets within your local area, state area, or regional area as possible. Obviously that can go into national and the Arnold and other meets as well, but most likely the aspect of attending meets is going to be most beneficial for people trying to really get a start when it comes to kind of the local and statewide kind of niche. Because as I mentioned when I was talking about the location pages, if you're at the meet, people are going to see you. And there's things from there that I'm going to talk about of how we can make sure that your presence is even more known. But if they see you, there's an easier way for you then to interact with them on Instagram, because they saw the PR's logo or they saw my face and they're saying, oh, I saw him at that meet. Okay, I'll follow him back. That's someone I know in some manner, and that's a trusting relationship. Versus someone just following you and having no prior relationship and then perceiving that as kind of a fake follow. This only works, though, if you can stand out at the meet. And that's honestly pretty simple. And the way to stand out at any meet is be extremely professional, organized, and a leader in the warm-up room. The fact is, Especially at local meets, the warrant rooms are terrible. Lifters don't know what they're doing. The majority of coaches don't know what they're doing. So if you can be someone that commands a rack in the warrant room, you're helping other lifters in the warrant room, you're being extremely organized. People can see that your lifters are like on point with their warm-ups, and you get to the attempts and they're making their attempts and everything's just like clockwork. Like, this guy knows what he's doing. You're going to stand out. And outside of your athletes doing well and getting good results, that's the single biggest way and easiest way for you to stand out at meets. Because again, the halo effect. If you have one good quality, they're going to perceive you as having multiple good qualities. So if you're professional and great in the warm-up room with lifters and being very helpful, they're going to perceive that as also things that there's even more to that, and your coaching is the same way as well. And then as you grow, getting a group of lifters doing a meet only expands that. If you've got 5 or 6 lifters doing your state meet, and then you've got family members out there with PR shirts as well and everything, it just blows it up. Everyone just sees PRs everywhere. They see all the lifters, they see me as the coach, they might see my friend who's coming as a handler, they see the family out there. It only extends the brand recognition by just being there and being as interactive and relational as possible with everyone around you. But maybe you don't have many lifters yet. That's not an issue. Just start handling for meets at free. Most likely, you're just going to have some friends at the gym who need a handler for their meet and go with them. Be able to get out there and display the same things. Have your brand logo, be able to be professional in the warm-up room, and then use the same tactics after with trying to create relationships through Instagram, through those lifters who did that meet, to be able to kind of get some ability just to be able to get your name out there. And then if not handling, volunteer. Be a spotter and loader. Be a referee. Do anything you can just to be out there as much as possible and be at as many meets as possible. I know it was kind of like a joke that if you were going to be at a USAPL meet in Missouri, you were going to see PRs everywhere back in like 2018 and 2019 when that was probably when I was more localized. You couldn't go to a USAPL meet in Missouri without seeing PRs everywhere, whether it was some of my athletes reffing the meets, whether it was my athletes competing, whether it was even some of my athletes who were coaching other people there. It just kind of was able to kind of just splatter my name everywhere, and that just kind of led to kind of infinite growth from that and just kept things rolling. So the last thing I'll cover in marketing is what I'll call extended marketing. These are things that can be fantastic, but I don't think they're for everyone. They can be great tools, but the tools I mentioned before are things that everyone can and should be doing. These are tools that should be specific if you can get benefit. And one is a website. That's something I think I mentioned in the first video, is that a website is an amazing tool, but if you don't know how to utilize it, it's going to be a waste of money. Usually a domain name's about $300, and you have to pay for that or website fee is about $300, and you have to pay that yearly. You have to pay a small domain fee every year. And you have to get a return on investment. If you're not getting X amount back from it and being able to kind of warrant paying that money, it's not useful. And so my website, because I understand a bit, not expert, but a bit about SEO, it gets about 10,000 views a month. I actually have if you go search free powerlifting programs right now, I am second or third anytime you search free powerlifting program. If you search best powerlifting program, I think I'm like 7th or 8th. So I get an incredible amount of hits from that. And I also have an article I wrote about percentages of 1RM, like on a pause squat and whatnot. That one gets like 2,000 plus views a month. So I've been able to utilize that because then people start looking at my blogs, they look at the coaching service, they look at the athlete results, and it creates a circle of being able to use my network or use my website to be able to create a network of people being able to gather information to then kind of filter them to my Instagram, filter them to my YouTube, and then be able to consume all my content. But that's not easy. That is an extremely hard thing to do, and I would bet there are very few powerlifting coaches who have really get much traction at all from their website. So it's something I wouldn't have most people do, but if you understand how to utilize a website, it can be a great tool. So if you do use a website though, there's a couple things I recommend. Is one, any Instagram post you make, just immediately transfer that to a blog post as well. Specifically, especially like myself, who writes kind of a blog-based format within his Instagram posts. It now makes it so I can have 2 mediums of where that is. So maybe people are seeing it on Instagram, but maybe also I'm getting some hits from Google coming over from that. Number 2, have a professional coaching service and application page. That's probably the most obvious one. I mean, if you're going to have a website, you're going to want to display your services on there. But even if you don't have a website, you're going to want to have some way that you're going to have an application page. I talked about that in the first video of how to be able to kind of have an application page that's really going to help to kind of get you and gather information. It's also going to give information to people to be able to understand kind of what's involved in your coaching services. So if you don't use a website, you can just use like Google Forms or a Jot form or whatnot. But obviously, for sure, have that on your website. Next up If possible, have some freebies. I have a temp selection sheet. I have my free programs. And honestly, that free program one gets probably more traffic than anything. And it gets people cycled in doing my free program. That could lead to, if I wanted to, probably having some type of templated program that I could sell, even though I don't think that's something I want to go down the track of. But again, providing value. You're coming to my website. If it's just like, here's my coaching service and here's an application page, that provides no value for the person other than a way to be able to hire you. But if you're providing content, you're providing freebies, you're providing whatever it may be that gives them some type of value, it's going to be beneficial for them to revisit your page in the future as well. And then lastly, the more topics, the better. This is something I learned. I actually used to personal train someone who owned a company, a very successful company that did Google SEO. And one of the biggest things he told me from the get-go is have a facts page and go search on Google for like type in powerlifting and see all the different kind of questions that come up. Like you're going to see all these type of questions. Like I have one that's what's the difference between USAPL versus USPA, because that's a frequently asked question on Google. And I would then make pages for every single one of them. And then I'd have my blog post with multiple topics, because the more topics you have, the more Google's going to be able to index that, and the higher you're going to start ranking and showing up by having those multiple topics. So that's getting down into more of the SEO stuff. But if you're going to start providing content on there, you want it to be a lot of content and a lot of diverse stuff so that you can be able to target multiple aspects of kind of what questions or searches are coming up in Google. Next up is YouTube, which you've already talked about, but I'm putting YouTube in this because straight up, it's not for everyone. YouTube is much harder than Instagram. It is not easy to gain traction on YouTube for many reasons. One being the algorithm, but two being that is dominated by some big players already. I made videos for almost 6 months with hardly any traction, at least in the views. I actually had really good kind of return on investment in the amount of people that would reach out for coaching after seeing YouTube videos, because I think it's a bit more of a personal connection than Instagram. So the return on investment in YouTube is much, much higher than Instagram, and there's probably nothing better than YouTube. But it was really hard to get any traction. And it wasn't until I started coaching Sean Noriega and he posted about it that it just blew up. And I would bet a lot of you either one, were here because of Sean, or two, you found me since because of kind of the traction he got me, as well as multiple videos of mine being shared on Reddit. That really kind of helped to gain traction as well. But YouTube was unbelievably hard. And I said not everyone's meant for it. Not only because it's hard, but not everyone's meant to talk on camera. As I mentioned, my strengths: I'm very analytical, I'm very knowledgeable, I convey complex topics in an understandable manner, and I'm articulate. What does that sound like I'd be good at? YouTube, and conveying these long form content formats. Not everyone is good at that. And it's not a bad thing. You just need to understand what you're good at and leverage your strengths. Because again, there's going to be only so much room for YouTube content creators in powerlifting. And so if it's not leveraging your strengths, and it's likely something that you're putting out stuff that like, it's not that it's bad content, but you can't convey it in the manner that is appealing or easily digestible, it's going to be hard for you to really get anything out of YouTube. But like I said, if you can gain traction on YouTube, it's strikes gold. Just for a random number putting out there, if for every 5 Instagram posts I did that were informative, maybe I get 1 client. For every 1 YouTube video I post, I get 5 people reaching out. It is really, really good in the sense of being able to get a return on investment of people reaching out. And if you rank them, it would be YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. Because I know of people who have hundreds of thousands of followers on TikTok that like they don't get very many. They get people from it, but like in comparison, I probably get more from YouTube than they almost get from TikTok, even though they have almost 20 times the following on it. If you do a YouTube though, 3 things. 1, find a niche and target it. Like I already said, no one was doing incredibly long format powerlifting content on YouTube. I knew I wasn't going to get 100,000 subscribers, but all I needed was a couple thousand, and that was the couple thousand I wanted to reach. Number 2, be consistent. I'm not as good about that lately, but when I first started, I was doing weekly, and then I went to every other week, and then I went to every month, and I'm going to try and keep it to once a month now for the most part, but be consistent with it. If you just post a video, then go 3 months, and then post a video, then go 6 months and post a video, you're never going to gain any traction. If I was doing the upload rate I am now when I first started, I probably would never have been where I'm at. I fortunately found an opportunity during COVID that I had a lot more time. I was posting weekly. It was able to get a lot of traction, and then it really kind of steamrolled from there, where now I can be a little less consistent with how often I post, but still be able to get the views I want. And then lastly, use your Instagram to heavily promote your YouTube. I thought that I could post YouTube videos and people would watch, but that wasn't the case. No one was watching. I really had to use my Instagram to kind of leverage in my YouTube. And even now, even though my YouTube is more popular, it still is really beneficial because there's a lot of people who don't subscribe to me that still will come to be able to just watch the YouTube videos. So being able to leverage both, using YouTube to leverage your Instagram and Instagram to leverage your YouTube to get all your social media platforms working together. And then to finish up marketing, the last kind of possible marketing tool is TikTok. I know nothing about TikTok. I don't even have a TikTok. I don't have it downloaded to look at it. So I really can't give you much information there. I kind of alluded to a bit on the YouTube section, but I do know some people who have TikToks that have hundreds of thousands of followers that use it and are getting benefit from there. But it's a very specific demographic. It tends to be a less serious demographic, a younger demographic. So if that is what you're going towards, more beginners and younger lifters, that might be a good medium for you. But at least for me, being advanced to intermediate, honestly, it's probably a terrible medium for me. It does not work very well. Instagram and YouTube is going to be a lot more along the lines of where my marketing message is going to work best. So next up on the topic list is business expansion, of thinking local, state, to national, to international. And I've said this many times already, focus on local and then expand. Because basically, barring you're some type of IG famous lifter, you're not going to have any kind of outreach outside of your own local area. Because much like any new business, you're going to start at a very small scale. Businesses usually don't start just all of a sudden shipping products internationally. They start just like a Walmart starts as a mom and pop store in one city and eventually grows to an international brand. As well as if you can't dominate locally, your chances of dominating nationally are slim to none. Small scale is always going to be easier than large scale, and that's going to help you with your proof of concept to see if it's actually something that's going to be able to be expanded to a larger scale. And as I talked about with looking at niches, there might be other coaches in your area, but look and see what demographics they're trying to be able to target. When I first moved to Springfield, I was kind of the only guy, so that was a pretty easy niche to be able to kind of move into. But now since powerlifting has grown in the area, we have multiple coaches. And especially since I've grown more to kind of like an national to international scale, it's allowed room for people to come in to be able to target different niches. In my area specifically, we have Jonathan Berry. He works a lot with younger teen lifters. We have Rob Crane, who works more with untested lifters. We have Matt Reynolds, who does only online coaching through Barbell Logic, formerly Starting Strength Online, and they have the specific niche of people who are interested in starting strength. So we have multiple powerlifting coaches in this area, but we all have distinct niches, as well as the fact that since I kind of moved from that kind of more local level up, it allowed room for other people to come in and be more locally focused. And with that too, you all can help each other. It's too much in any industry, but fitness in general is people look at everyone's competition and it's an ego stroke and they're hating on this person and hating on this person locally because they want to beat them. I will tell you straight up, the more you network with them and you work together and don't step on each other's toes, the more you'll grow as a whole. It goes back to what I talked about with Solana, with her podcast and 2 White Lights, or Solana's coaching and mine. If we can be able to distinctly target specific niches, we can grow powerlifting as a whole to where both of our niches at a local level are going to have more people wanting to join into that. So and I can tell you that the farther you get up in coaching, let's say like the national, international scale, the people I network now that are at the similar level of coaching, we all want to help each other. Like there's very little competition. It's just the local. It's local where people like are insecure about their abilities, that they tend to want to like butt heads, where the opposite would be much better for them. Network with other coaches, have distinct demographics you're going towards, and help each other out so that if you can be able to kind of grow powerlifting as a whole in your area. So looking at how to grow locally, if there's a powerlifting gym in your area, get involved with it. And if there isn't one, I'm not saying to open one, but try to form one. That's actually what I kind of did. There wasn't really a powerlifting gym in the area, but there was a gym that was there that was open to becoming more of a powerlifting gym. So I helped them kind of bring together people who were scattered throughout the area and start to formulate an actual powerlifting gym that then grew and became very successful from that. Springfield's pretty small though, and actually we have kind of multiple powerlifting gyms now, but depending on where you are, you might have multiple powerlifting gyms or just multiple gyms in general, and you can't be at every single one. But that's where, as I mentioned already in the marketing section, is being able to network through location pages or looking through members that are liking posts to be able to start interacting with them so that they can see that you're from the local area too. They can see who you are friends with, and they might say, oh, I don't work out at that gym, but I know that lifter, and he's coached by Steve. So it starts to create this little bit of interconnection there where it doesn't even mean trying to poach them from their powerlifting gym coming over, but it can be a way to start expanding locally to other gyms in your area versus just the one that you're kind of in sense stationed out of. And initially, my goal for most people, pick 1 to 2 gyms to focus in. Like for me, it was originally GP Athletics in Springfield and STL Barbell in St. Louis. I was trying to coach as many people in those 2 gyms as possible. And then once I was getting a notable like stronghold, let's say 5+ lifters, I was looking at the next gym. That's where I said I went to Kansas City to look at Strong Barbell because I knew they had a lot of lifters, where I wanted to create a little bit of a foothold in that gym as well. But you don't want to try and do all these gyms at once. You want to be very targeted and focused. If you can't get one gym, a foothold in one gym, you're not going to get a foothold in 10 gyms all at once. Like start to where you have a good foothold in one gym and then just continually keep growing from there and look at where the potential business expansion should be. Because likely, barring you're in Texas and Houston and your gym has hundreds of powerlifters, you're going to need to be more statewide. Local is a great start, but you're going to probably need to eventually be a bit more statewide where there's a bit more of a network there. But from that could be your business. I think too many people see like someone like myself or some other coaches who are coaching at a national level and all these different lifters and thinking I want to be there. And I'm not going to say that's not fun. It is very cool, some of the opportunities I'm awarded with the people I coach. But within that, I just love coaching. I love it. And I get just as enjoyment seeing my 350 Wilks lifter hit PRs and go 9 for 9 at a local meet as I see someone vying for top 3 at a national championship. I'm kind of almost like ignorant to weight lifted now because of what I've been able to experience. If I continued to just still be local and state level, I would still be very happy. So know that is a niche, and that if you never go past that, but you can still create a business where you can make an income and a living off of that, that is fantastic. You don't have to be a national coach to be the best powerlifting coach you can be. As I mentioned in my first video, my goal is to be the best powerlifting coach in the world, but not literally in the world. I mean to each individual athlete. And it doesn't matter if they are a world level athlete or they are a local level athlete. I just want to be the best powerlifting coach to them. And within that goal, that doesn't matter what level they're at. So if that's your goal as well, just know that like being at that local state level can be extremely rewarding, and you don't need to grow past that. Because the truth is, like for myself, I've kind of lost my grasp on the local and state level in Missouri. If I ever wanted to go back to that, like I lost a little bit at the national level, I wanted to be more just local and state, I would have to rework that. I'd probably start having to direct some meets again. I'd have to be at more meets locally, things like that, because I haven't put as much focus on that. So notice when you start to put your time elsewhere, you're going to lose grasp on other things as well. And another big reason just to worry about local level and a singular gym and expand from there is because it's going to take a while to make a notable living from this. I could have included this in the initial steps, but because there's a strong likelihood that you're going to be working a full-time job and starting your coaching job as part-time on top of that. That's what the majority of people are going to do. I was very fortunate. My wife makes a good living. So when we moved here and I decided I want to be a powerlifting coach, I just went for it. That was awesome. But very few people are probably in the same scenario as me. They're going to probably need to work a full-time job while being a part-time coach. So trying to like start as like a large-scale operation is just not going to be possible. You need to start small and then gradually grow from there. And even if your goal is to grow rapidly, fact of the matter is it's probably going to grow gradually. I mean, it took me, I'm going to talk about it a little later, it took me 2.5 years before I was making a decent living, like a livable living off of this. So it's going to take a while to where you need kind of a backup plan, whether you're being a personal trainer and then powerlifting coaching on top of that, whether you have a full-time job in some other field. Weirdly enough, there's a lot of engineers who get into powerlifting and then switch over. So you're going to want to start small for multiple reasons, but one, because you're likely going to be doing this part-time at the beginning. So from there, if you want to expand nationally and internationally, it's just going to kind of happen organically. You're probably not going to be able to force that. Most likely what's going to happen is you're going to be dominating locally at first, and because of that, you're going to start to have a little bit of outreach elsewhere. Like for me, I was definitely dominating locally in the state of Missouri, and then I started having some little tidbits here and there. I had someone in Canada, I had someone out in Virginia, and then from there, I used a lot of the same tactics, especially Virginia, of looking at that person's gym, and then being able to can interact with those people at that gym, and then growing that gym up, and then again, it just continues to expand from there. But if you're not dominating locally and don't have a stranglehold of where people can look at Missouri and be like, oh, that's kind of Steve's area, you're gonna have a hard time expanding from that. And in hindsight, looking at how I did it, there was nothing I could have done to force it. It was just continue to do what I was doing, do a really good job, and everything just kind of organically happened. The one thing I say you could do though, that could help other than just being a great coach and putting out a great marketing message and content and whatnot, is being good at networking. And that can happen from every single level of understanding how to network. I'd say in general though, still networking is probably more important at the local and state level. Not that it can't be important later on, but it definitely is more important there, because what you do with your local networking very well might supersede what you do on social media. But eventually, as you grow to a larger scale, it's going to be more what you do on social media is likely going to supersede what you can do networking wise. Even though it's still very important, what you do on social media likely is going to be able to be a bigger part of what your marketing is. So simply put, within networking, especially at the local and state level, scratch people's backs, whether they're going to scratch yours back or not. In the fitness industry as a whole, you're gonna have to do a lot of stuff for free. Whether that's free coaching when you first start out, free volunteering, there's gonna be a lot of stuff to do for free. But again, you look at free, but I'm looking at it as here's my way of spending my budget for expenses for growth, but it just is my time versus actual monetary value, which you might see with other businesses as more monetary value that also includes time. So I'll just go through a couple simple tactics here. This isn't all encompassing, but it can give you some ideas that I did and still do to this day. So every local meet I would go to, I would introduce myself to the meet director if I didn't know them already and tell them either before or after, fantastic job, really appreciate what you did. Especially as a meet director myself, I know how hard this is and really appreciate what you did for the lifters, and then go talk to the gym owner and let them know, hey, thank you very much for hosting this and taking time out of and moving all this stuff and taking the time out of what could be time for your gym members to work out to allow to do this meet. Because again, just it's simple, but it starts to build relationships there. And really, especially with the meet directors, once I got to know them well enough, simple thing I do is every meet I go to, and I still, for the most part, to an extent, do this for every local meet I go to, is on the way there, I text the meet director and ask them if they want anything. Let them know, hey, I'm stopping at a gas station, I'm picking up a couple energy drinks, would you like one as well? Just simple things like that. Honestly, I just call that being a good person. I even though I don't even need that anymore, like the networking for local people, I just do that because it's just nice to do. I would love for someone to do that to me. So networking is a lot of doing to others as you would have them do to you. And if you do that, some people are just going to take it and they're going to be leeches that take your goodwill. Others, though, are going to be people who are going to pay you back, and that's going to be very beneficial for your business. Because the fact is, as I already mentioned with meet directors and gym owners have a lot of pull within the local setting or the state setting. They are, in a sense, the leaders of the community. So if you can get in good standing with them, it likely can help to lead to a lot of other opportunities. So something I said before too is just get involved as a volunteer. Become a state ref, become a spotter and loader. Just ways, again, you can just be able to get to know either and kind of scratch the meet director's backs or the state director, or even just with that. If you're spotting and loading, likely the other 5 to 7 people are power lifters too. You're going to get to know them, increase your network, as well as the people competing in the meet are going to be able to see you there and be able to kind of just see your face and have a little bit of face recognition, and or if you have your logo, brand recognition. And again, another thing I've already talked about, warrant room etiquette. Be helpful in the warrant room. If you can be able to network in the warrant room, being able to talk to other coaches there, being able to talk to other athletes with no other intention, just to be a good and helpful person, that's eventually going to lead to other things. Because again, if I did this just to grow my business, it would probably come across as fake. But these are still things, even though that they don't necessarily grow my business anymore because of the point I'm at, I still do them to the exact same extent because I'm doing this for a genuine purpose that I just want to be nice and good to other people, because I think if I do that, tends to just make my life better. So do it with very good intentions, and it's going to come across more honest. As I kind of alluded to, befriend these other coaches that you see in the warrant rooms. Like, get to know them, whether it's at the local, the state, the national level. Just get to know them because of networking purposes, but because of being able to kind of help to grow each other's businesses. There are definitely coaches that I've run across throughout my career and still to this day that it's very obvious they look at me as competition. It's also other coaches that very obviously, like, they know that in some manner we're competing for the same clients, but they see that networking with each other is better as a whole. Because guess what? Not to be too arrogant, I probably have referred out over 6 figures in business over the last year to other coaches who just network with me that I really like, who I think are good at their job. So if you choose to just be an enemy of these coaches who likely could be very beneficial for you, you're going to be on your own. But if you make the right friends and you network with the right people, it could lead to very good opportunities where that coach or you combined can be able to help each other's businesses out. And so when you're getting to like the national level, let's say you're just getting into your first national or whatnot, it would be great to still network with as many of the, like, let's say top level coaches as you can. And I'm going to tell you, as someone who knows all of them, it's never like barring they're in the middle of something. It's never an interruption. We love being able to talk to everyone. Don't feel nervous coming up and saying hi and just getting to know us a little bit. Because again, selfish purposes, if you can start befriending and start interacting with these people and people see that these people follow you on Instagram, they share your stuff on Instagram, it's going to continue to help build you up to hopefully get you from that point where this is my first national meet with just one lifter to the point where I can start creeping up with them and being more of like peers in that same level, just by helping to kind of network and allow people to be able to see that you're kind of working towards that level. And then lastly, as mentioned in the marketing tactics section, share people's posts that fit in your marketing strategy, because guess what? No one's ever like gotten mad because you shared their posts. It only creates goodwill with them. They are more likely to now share your post in a return to a favor from like you can call it like an imaginary debt that they like. It's not trying to get that to happen, but just if it does, knowing that the goodwill can go back and forth to where that network can kind of create it where you're helping each other out. All right, so that wraps up business expansion. So let's get into accounting. This one's gonna be a little bit shorter because the first thing I'm gonna say is I'm not an expert here. If you are starting a business and you plan this to be full-time, especially if you're getting into an LLC, all the kind of stuff, you need to get a good tax accountant. So you can sit down with them to be able to understand what they want you to do with tracking, all the kind of stuff of what you can deduct. Talk with them. I'm going to give you some ideas of general things that most people are going to be doing, but the main thing you need to do is being able to get together with a CPA or a tax accountant to be able to plan this out together. So first thing, this should probably go without saying, but track your revenue and your expenses. There's obviously the QuickBooks or things like that. I've actually used those, but I didn't like them. I'm just simple. I like my Google Sheet. I just have a way I'm keeping track of it because for the most part, I'm pretty simple. I just offer coaching. There's not much else. If I was having more brand extensions, I'd probably get into a bit more of a software. But for just general coaching, it's pretty easy to be able to track it through that. You also could hire a bookkeeper. I know definitely most gyms will do that. It's usually about, I believe, like $100 to $2 a month, maybe a little bit more to hire a bookkeeper, but that's someone who can track everything for you, create your business accounts, and that can make things a lot easier and kind of take that off your plate if that's needed. Now, one of the greatest parts about owning a business is being able to have business deductions and expenses. And if you're not sure what that fully means, basically, if you have your revenue and you have your expenses, if you expense something, it counts against your revenue, which shows that your net profit is less than just your actual like revenue per se, because the expense is deducting against it. So to break that down, don't take this verbatim. It's a lot more complicated than this. I might not even be perfectly right on this, but basically how it works is if you make $100, but you spend $10 on a business expense, your net profit is $90, and that is your taxable income. And so basically what that would mean, let's say you're in the 24% tax bracket. If you had not deducted anything and you made $100 and your 24% tax bracket, you would owe $24 in taxes. But if your net profit's only $90 and it's 24% tax bracket, your taxes are only $21. So in a sense, you're getting, like when you expense things, let's say you buy things for the business, you're getting a discount per se, because that is now not taxable income. And there are a crazy amount of things you can tax deduct. Again, talk to your accountant. Honestly, some are a little bit looser and some are a little bit more strict on what they consider taxable items, because there's a lot of loopholes. That's where I don't know. But I'm going to go through a general list of things that you can tax deduct that are generally likely universal for any powerlifting coach. So I'm just going to read straight off my computer here so I can go through these pretty quick. But my coaching from Brad Couillard, it's continuing education. I count that as a business expense. Any office equipment, computers, desk, anything that I'm working with, count that as a business expense. I have square footage in my house that is used for my office and my garage gym. So there's a calculation for how that's deducted, but that's part of my deductions. Dinners with my wife where we talk about business, which is every dinner. So we can expense those dinners. Any travel related expense related to your business, most likely traveling to meets. My car was purchased through my business, so all gas and repairs are expensed. Subscriptions for software use for business, i.e. Dropbox and Jotform or a website. My phone bill is fully expensed. My utilities percentage of the square footage of your office space at your house. So the gas bill, the electric bill, all that kind of stuff deducted from the percentage of the square footage I use for my business and my house. Deducted. My USAPL membership, gym clothing and supplements, gym membership, security system for my house. And the list can go on. There's a lot more. Again, talk to your tax accountant. I constantly am messaging mine saying, hey, can I expense this? To be able to see if that kind of fits in with what he is working with. So that's the best way to do it. But just know that there are a lot of things. Now you do need to be careful though, because depending on the person, you may not want to expense too much. Because again, of my wife, I don't even need to report an income to be able to qualify for loans and stuff like that, like when we're trying to look for a house. But if you're ever wanting to buy a house and your business is reporting like basically no income because you expense so much, even though in a sense you're making a good deal of money, the bank's going to look at it and be like, you can't afford a house. So you do have to be careful depending on your situation. You can't expense too much if you need to be reporting an income for tax purposes and for loan purposes and whatnot. And the last thing to know is for most states, I don't believe there's sales tax for services like personal training and or online coaching. So in Missouri, there is no sales tax. So I have no sales tax part of my coaching. So if someone pays $250, there's no sales tax on it. But you do need to look into that for your individual state. And if you do brand extensions, they're very well could. If you're going to sell like I sell t-shirts, but I sell them at cost. I'm just a medium of like people are buying them and I'm just shipping them. If I was to sell them above cost, like if I paid $10 and I sold them for $20, I would need to charge sales tax legally to my clients. So that is another reason why I don't charge anything for t-shirts, because I don't even want to worry about sales tax. And that goes for meet directing too. Again, you need to check with your tax accountant because depending on the state, for meet directing, the actual meet revenue, I do not need to have sales tax. If I was to sell t-shirts though, at meets, I would need to tax those. If I was to sell food and stuff, I would need to tax those. So usually what I did for meets is one, the t-shirt's part of the entry fee. So it's at cost per se for the shirt, so that I don't have to tax the shirt individually as a separate item. And then if I'm going to be having any food, drinks or anything, I'm going to have either the gym do that or I'm going to hire a caterer, and I'm not going to touch that because honestly, I just don't want to deal with sales tax. Since my coaching doesn't need sales tax, I don't want anything else to do with it. So I make sure with my meet directing and other things I did that like anything that requires sales tax was either somehow worked into the entry fee and or the gym or caterers handle it. All right, so to wrap up this video, I'm just gonna kind of give a synopsis of the real life example of my business. Now, if you've watched both parts, you've probably got a good gist of it, but I'm just gonna kind of put it in kind of chronological order so you can kind of see the progression I went through of kind of how I started out versus where I'm at now. So first and foremost, my background is I've actually got my MBA in marketing. I had no plan to do what I was doing. Basically, I started working as a personal trainer part-time while I was in graduate school. And I graduated during the height of the recession and the job market being terrible. So it was darn near impossible to get a job. There was a whole crazy story about a job I got, whatever it was. I eventually was like, okay, well, I like what I'm doing. And I was literally, the reason why is I was about to turn 25 or 26 when you have to be kicked off your parents' insurance. I was like, I need to get a job that has insurance. So a fitness manager position within Gold's Gym opened up where I was already training. And I was like, I'll do that. And I did it and absolutely loved it. And I was able to do really well at it and eventually got promoted to where I was a part of opening a brand new, very high-end Gold's Gym. Was part of that opening and was there for 3 years. Eventually went and did. And then during that time is when I had started powerlifting. I believe probably 2013, 14, I kind of started dabbling in like 5-3-1 and stuff. Wasn't doing competition because honestly, there wasn't really anything. USAPL really didn't exist in Missouri at that time. USP, I think, was just starting out. So I was more just like training because I wanted to. I had done strongman competitions prior, but I started powerlifting. And as the head trainer and fitness manager at the gym, I started coaching some friends that were there. I had some employees that wanted to start powerlifting. I just did it for free. My first ever meet in 2015, I think I had 3 people I coached for free that competed at that one. One who still competes to this day, my 74-year-old M4 lifter, national champion Peggy, who I train now for almost 10 years, I think. So I started doing it for free. And that lasted for a while because honestly, at that point, I mean, I was very, very busy as my job as a fitness manager. I was not in any way thinking I was going to be a powerlifting coach, as well as really at that point, there was very few. There was basically like TSA, De Novo. There was Mike to share. There's very few people doing it, and honestly, at that point, that didn't even seem like a realistic thing that I could do. And so, since I was making plenty of money doing what I was doing, I was just doing this on the side. I had some fun with it. So, as mentioned in this video, I moved to Springfield, and I was thinking I was going to be a personal trainer, but I found very quickly that that was not a good business to be in here, at least for me. And so I saw a niche with powerlifting. I was already coaching 4 or 5 people. My wife was pushing me to start charging them anyway. So I was like, you know what? Let's give this a shot. Like, again, like if this doesn't work out, it's not a big deal. We're very financially stable. So why not take a run at like what my dream job would be? Like worst case, I coach like 10 people and I have fun and awesome. That's all I would really need to do. So I started my LLC, I started PRs, I started the Instagram page, I started my website and started getting this all together, aka like the initial steps in the business structure that I talked about from the get-go. I really planned all of this. Again, I talked about in the part 1 video, I had all this planned out in my head when I first started. It wasn't like I just started and like I'm gonna be a powerlifting coach. When I decided that's something I wanted to go to, I really thought hard about how am I going to do this? I'm super weak. There's no one powerlifting in Springfield. Like how am I going to get any outreach here? Because no one knows who I am. I have no foothold in anything powerlifting. And so I really had to sit down and figure out my business strategy and all these things that I've discussed premature to starting the business. So I knew what I needed to do moving forward to grow it. So again, as mentioned in this video, there wasn't really a powerlifting gym in Springfield. There was one that was kind of open to the idea and they wanted to shift towards that from their more personal training structure. So I decided to network with them, start really helping them grow their gym into a powerlifting gym, holding meets there and everything and using it as my headquarters. With that, like I said, directed meets. I ran their Instagram account, and then every Saturday I go in and help coach people for free in their open gym, just really trying to create a foothold within the local community there. Like I said, since no one was really doing it, I very quickly became kind of the leader of that community in that time. And that eventually grew to me coaching numerous people in that gym. And then once it was a bit more noticeable that I was official, that I was like a powerlifting coach, funny enough, back in St. Louis, the gym I managed since there was no powerlifting gyms in St. Louis really either, we allowed powerlifters, and we were one of the only gyms that did, mainly because of me and saying okay. But once I had left, they kind of got kicked out, and there was a new gym that was formed called STL Barbell, and so I knew all these people already. And once they saw that like I was coaching powerlifting, they're like, hey, let's reach out to Steve. We already know him. So I started getting a little bit more of a grasp there. And then, like I said, I went from that as soon as I got a grasp in Springfield, and I had a little bit of a grasp in St. Louis. I looked at Kansas City as my next expansion. So fortunately, oddly enough, someone I knew in Springfield moved to Kansas City. When someone asked them who they should hire as a powerlifting coach, they said me. So I started coaching them. And then that led to really rapid expansion in Kansas City. And then that's where things really took off from there, where like once I got into Kansas City, that's where it truly became like a full-time job. So at that point, doing really well, but unfortunately the deal I had with the gym in Springfield I was at kind of went sour. And in reality, I didn't really even need a gym to be kind of like stationed at anymore, but I still really had a desire to grow the local community. That was still really beneficial for me, as well as I had a lot of lifters that were benefiting from that, and I wanted to continue to host meets for them and have a place for them to be able to train. So I was able to link up with another gym and be able to continue kind of the growth of local powerlifting, because at that point, that was still kind of my niche, is more the local and state level. And since things were going well, I started to get a little more traction. Like I had someone reach out from Virginia. I had some people from nationals that were doing really well in the Arnold. And so I started gaining more traction. I had little blips of people from different states. And that started creating this kind of momentum that was rolling to where I was starting to get a bit more outreach outside of the state level, even though still I would have considered my niche to be local and statewide to Missouri. What really blew things up is when COVID hit, I saw an opportunity. I knew from personal training and the kind of the ups and downs of waves of what clients and coaches do, that one thing that happens is people don't like firing their coaches. They like to have a reason. Actually, random tangent at Gold's Gym, the amount of people, the amount of people who were hundreds that only had one session left on their account at Gold's Gym because they didn't want to tell their coach they were quitting. So they just wouldn't ever show up for that last session to tell them. And so people like ways to be able to get out of things. So I knew as soon as COVID hit and people weren't going to be able to train, that there were going to be a lot of people that were going to stop with their coaches and use an easy excuse that I can't train right now due to COVID, or I need to take a break because I don't have equipment, I can only do things at home, and I'll reach back out after things open up, which they were never going to. It was just their easy out. So I knew that, and as well as the fact that I knew there were a lot of coaches that like, this is a downtime. I got a little vacation. There's not much to do, and kind of be lazy during this time. And I saw that as an opportunity to like, I'm going to go even harder. I'm going to go all in. And that's when I started my YouTube page and really ramped up my content creation to just flood it. And that's when I started getting a lot of traction. And some of the posts I made there led to some other things. And then it just continued to blossom from there, and the dominoes fell. But even before COVID happened, I had already at my cap, like in sense of like being successful. Like I said, I was good at being that local and state level. Even before COVID, though, I was already at my cap for how many people I coached. Now, I was not charging near as much as I am now, because that's probably the biggest difference between being local and state versus being where I'm at, is that the perceived value of who I am, I can charge a lot more. So that's where there is benefit there, which is also why, like I said in the first video, I'm really hoping to be the help of the push to kind of increase pricing so that like local and state people can start charging as much as I am, and I'm charging even more, so that all as a whole, this profession can be a much more sustainable career. But even though I was full, I wasn't getting quite enough inquiries yet to where losing a client wasn't an issue. I would lose a client, and I'd be able to fill a spot, but it might take 2 or 3 months. It wasn't at a point where like I could afford to lose anyone. So when COVID happened, I really saw the opportunity to set up the long-term success. So I could create a pool of inquiries that, like, no matter when I have a spot open, I can fill that immediately to where I have an extremely sustainable business long-term. COVID's happening. YouTube's going really well. I saw another opportunity. I'd actually been talking about this all year because I kind of foresaw this coming, is that Nationals was going to get canceled. And I was talking to some of my Nationals lifters that if Nationals gets canceled, I'm going to host a primetime local meet. I've never seen anyone do this. I've been thinking about it for a while, but if Nationals gets canceled, this is the time to do it. I'm going to get all the best lifters in this region to come out and do a small money meet, but a money meet that's really well ran. We're going to get national wrestlers so they can set national records. We're going to do an awesome live stream and do all this. And it worked out perfect. We had a fantastic meet, and one of the reasons I did this is the number one reason I did that is I wanted to meet for my lifters lift, and that got canceled. That was the absolute number one reason. The number two reason is, while I had a decent grasp of the local level scene, the more higher level lifters in the region, I still was not kind of like networking with yet. I hadn't gotten to that point. And I saw this not necessarily as a way to be able to coach them per se, even though one lifter, Autumn Green, I do coach now from that meet. Again, meet directing leads to coaching people. I saw it as a way to be able to, like, if I can network with these top level lifters and, like, again, scratch their backs, they might scratch mine in the future, because I just now saved them from Nationals getting canceled by having this primetime meet just for them. They're gonna likely show me favor in the future. Well, there was this person who did that meet, Angelo Fortino. And long story short, I now am the co-host of Two White Lights, because that led to a friendship with Angelo and just us communicating back and forth. Him realizing just kind of the fit that we had together in the sense of kind of what we brought and differentiating us as co-hosts. And that has now led to Two White Lights. And obviously Two White Lights has taken off over the last year. And then from there, it was already actually before the Midwest Prime Time. I already knew I was going to be coaching Sean Noriega. And so pretty much from the Two White Lights and Sean Noriega coaching, pretty much starting at the same time, things just blew up from there. That's when obviously that it went from just like a local state level thing to where like it was nationally known, and like people all over were reaching out. And again, just organically happened from doing what I do best, which is trying to be the best coach to my powerlifters, and networking and giving back to the powerlifting community as much as possible. So that's awarded me now to where, like I said, like I don't do as much of the local state, because like with Two White Lights and the people I coach, we can do a lot more nationally, like in the helping USAPL with the planning of the Pro Series, Two White Lights commentating and going to all these meets and being able to do really, really cool things, which is great. But again, if I just always stuck at the local and state level, I don't know if it's not like I'd be less happy. I was very happy then. It's just me naturally. I'm an entrepreneur at heart. I want to keep growing and seeing what I can take this to. So it kind of feeds my desire to do that. But outside of that, again, the local and state level is great. I just really hope we can be able to get that money for those local coaches to start rising up, so it can be a more sustainable kind of approach for them. So that brings me where I'm at now. And again, with what I've set up from the get-go, I pretty much have kept doing the whole time. I think there's only a couple things that I've mentioned, like one, business hours, two, communication. There's little things here and there that I've changed. But for the most part, what I set up from the get-go is what I still do to this day. And I think that's one of the biggest strengths I've had as a powerlifting coach, is having that business mind, setting a plan that worked darn near perfect and continuing to execute on it. And I still follow that target audience. I still market towards it. And again, if you just do it out of genuine benefit of trying to help out the community and help out powerlifters, it's going to come across genuine, as well as sticking to those goals you set. If you didn't watch the first video, I talk about kind of deciding what your values and your goals are and making sure every decision you make for your business aligns with those, and saying no to things that don't and saying yes to things that do. Like I mentioned, one of the things that did change is I wanted to help grow powerlifting. In the start, that was more local, by trying to create a community, by hosting local meets. Eventually that led to the ability to expand that to more a broad scale through Two White Lights. So it's still that goal is still there of growing powerlifting. It just switched a bit from taking it from more of a small scale to a large scale. So that wraps up Powerlifting Coaching, the business side. In this particular part 2, we talked about marketing, business expansion, accounting, and then kind of my real life example of kind of what led me from where I was 5 or 6 years ago to now. But hopefully that helped you out. Like I said, I would be shocked if every coach didn't learn something from that marketing section. I think that's where a lot of coaches don't have a great understanding. And either they're just going to copy what other people are doing, or they don't have a great plan for it. So hopefully that was very beneficial for you. If you have any questions, always feel free to make sure to reach out. I'd be happy to answer. Make sure to subscribe, because I know based on analytics, I have a lot of people who watch my videos that don't subscribe, probably because I only say this at the very end and only my subscribers watch at the end. But subscribe if you haven't already. Share this with anyone that you think would be beneficial. And otherwise, I will talk to you the next time. Peace.